So I want to do a quick disclaimer. This is going to work about 96% of the time. The reason why is there are people with antisocial behavior that do enjoy picking, tormenting people, and the strategies that we're going to talk about might not work for them or will not work for them because they do actually enjoy picking on people. If that happens, you have no alternative but to tell somebody or to quit, and hopefully you'll tell somebody. But the good thing is most people are good. Most people don't understand how their behavior has offended somebody. And if you tell them that their behavior has offended you, chances are they're going to stop. I do want to address a couple myths though. Some people say that this is infringing on their freedom of speech. Freedom of speech only applies to the government not being able to punish citizens for criticizing them. Your employer has the absolute right to dictate how you should behave and what you can say in the workplace. The other one that I always get is like, it's a joke. I didn't mean to offend them. They can't take a joke. It's not my fault. Think of it this way. The law thinks of it differently. So let's say Billy there wants to play a practical joke on Don and has glued the coffee cup to the table. The coffee cup was very special to Don. His mother gave it to him. The last thing his mother gave before she passed away. As he picks it up, it breaks, and Billy thinks it's the funniest thing ever. However, Don is incredibly sad because it was the last thing his mother gave. Now, the question becomes, whose reaction is reasonable? Billy didn't mean to break the cup, but Don had a huge psychological impact on him. He actually had to take disability leave, and he ended up suing the employer. Who's right? Well, guess what? The law says it doesn't matter what the intent was, what the outcome is. It's what matters. Sort of like if you accidentally kill somebody, although it matters whether you intended to kill them or not, you still killed somebody and you're going to be punished. The same thing applies. Even though you didn't mean to offend somebody, when you offended somebody, punishment still applies. So there's a couple codes, and occupational health and safety says that you must investigate workplace violence, and workplace violence is a very broad definition of it, and it has to ensure that there is no discrimination or harassment occurring in the workplace. And Alberta Human Rights actually dictates that it has to have a workplace a free workplace, free of harassment and discrimination. So there's two laws that apply here. What I like to compare it to is actually drunk driving. Compared to in the 1950s, if you killed somebody while drunk driving, chances are you were left off the hook or you had, a slap on the wrist. Now, if you don't take the cab, even if you don't hurt somebody, if you're just caught drinking and driving, you're going to jail. Social norms are changing, and the social norms to workplace behavior are also changing. So let's talk about respect. Why do we avoid inappropriate behavior, or why do we ignore inappropriate behavior? Well, we sometimes think it's justified. We avoid it because it's human nature to avoid. We don't want to be confrontational. We don't have the skills or the knowledge. We don't understand the impact it has. We lack the self-confidence. We fear that we're going to actually become the target, or we just model the behavior, and you'll be surprised how modeling behavior works and how quickly just climatize to the behavior around you. So when you are around a disrespectful workplace, chances are you're going to be disrespectful yourself. If I ask a group of people who wants respect in the workplace, everyone's going to put their hand up. If I ask them who causes this disrespect in the workplace, all the hands go down. And if I ask them to address it, that's how you clear a room. So where's the disconnect? Why does everyone want respect in the workplace, but it doesn't occur as they want to? And so hopefully we'll address these in the next couple of slides. So your brain is a huge organ, and it uses a lot of energy. And that conversation that we have with ourselves, we tend to think we're 100% in control, but we're not. There's a lot of automatic processes that occur behind the scenes. And so these things are called biases. So confirmation bias, what that does is it says we are always on the lookout to confirm what we know. So if we think somebody's a jerk, we always look for behavior that confirms that they're a jerk. Frequency. If somebody's being mean to us just recently, we think that person has always been mean to us. We focus on the negative. So we tend to focus on negative behavior than positive behavior. So somebody's been nice to us for a while, and then they do one negative thing, we focus on that negative. We also focus on stuff that's easy. So when we are introduced to change, we don't like it because change is hard. The IKEA effect is if we build something ourselves, we hold more value to it. So if we've created a process and somebody challenges that process at work, we tend to be a little bit more defensive of that process. And ultimately, it's called the pseudo-exceptionalism bias. We all think we're special snowflakes. We're smarter, better, more important than everyone else. And we feel that we're undervalued, unrecognized, unappreciated. We need that. It's called confidence. When it's too much, it's called narcissism. When it's too little, it's called lack of confidence or self-esteem issues. But we need to survive. We need it in order to feel good about ourselves. But all of these things work in the background that we don't even realize that they do. And they fall into this area of habits. These automatic processes that we don't even realize what's going on. There's good habits and bad habits. We tend to focus on bad habits, but we also have good habits like showing up to work on time, high work quality, strong work ethics, and that sort of thing. And as we all know, habits are extremely difficult to change. Sleeping in is a habit. The way our morning grooming habits of, do you brush your teeth on the left side, right side first? Do you put on your socks in the morning first, your underwear, your shirt? Phone addiction is huge. And I'll give you an example how we do complicated things and we don't even realize that we're doing it. So how many of you have ended up at work and you didn't even realize how you got there, how many lights you stopped on, whether it was red or green, if you cut some people off? That's your brain taking over and you not doing really complicated things without you even realizing. 95% of what we do is habits. And so 95% of workplace behavior and processes are habits. So are habits difficult to change? Absolutely. Is workplace behavior and processes difficult to change? Absolutely. And what happens when somebody brings up that we should change? Hey, you should lose weight. You should stop biting your nails. You should come in on time. We get defensive. We don't say, maybe that person is right. No, we say, talk to the hand, mind your own business. It's natural. So when you are addressing somebody's behavior, be prepared, they're going to be defensive. So what's going on? Well, like I said, your brain is a huge energy sucker. And the majority of the energy comes from your frontal lobe that does all the higher executive functions. Your basal ganglia is where all your habits happen. So when we learn something, actual physical neurons get connected, and that's our habit. And so it takes it from the frontal lobe to the basal ganglia, and we're not even thinking about it. It goes into an automatic mode. That's how we conserve energy with our brains. We can learn a new habit, but the old habit never goes away. That's why it's so easy to fall back into old habits. So when we see a cue to do something, our brain goes, hey, I got this. We've done this before. Don't worry about it. And we aren't even thinking about it. We just go. And then when we finish it, our brain gives us a reward, endorphin hit. And it's like, congratulations, you completed that task. We can hijack a habit. However, we need to understand the new process. We need to be trained in the new process. We need to policies, procedures, and checklists so we can we're doing it correctly, and we need to apply it on a continuous basis. There's a couple other things that we need in order to change a habit. We need a belief, so what's in it for them? We need a belief of what's in it for everyone in order for the habit to change, and we need a belief in ourselves that we can change and that we are able to change. If we don't have those two things, the benefit and the belief, then we're going to get into a self-fulfilling prophecy of it's not going to change, it's not going to get better, and they're going to be right. So what some people don't understand is there are people who are introverts that tend to be targets, and there are other individuals who are extroverts, and they don't understand why introverts are targets, because if that happened to them, they would stand up for themselves. people are different. People lack self-confidence, they're shy, they don't want to cause issues. And it's really up to you, if you see inappropriate behavior, to be that extrovert and to address that behavior for those introverts that aren't willing to stand up for themselves. So what can we do? What can we focus on? The good thing is we don't have to change everything. We just have to do a couple little things. It's called the 80-20 rule. And what it says is that 20% of our customers are responsible for 80% of the results. All the clothes in your closets, 80% of the time, you're only wearing 20% of your clothes. You have that favorite hoodie, those favorite pants. 80% of the issues that occur at work result from 20% of the employees that we have. And so there's a lot of issues that occur at work that don't really matter. And there's a few critical issues that we can address that will make a huge difference. And so the 80-20 rule says that if we address those critical issues, we're going to get 80% of the results and we're going to get 80% of the change. If we focus on those insignificant issues, well, we're going to be very busy, but it's going to only address 20% of that issues at work. Personal privacy. You oversharers, if you overshare your personal information about your sex life, what's going on at home, you're going to be a target. It is your right not to have your personal information shared in the workplace. And if it is, you have the absolute right to respectfully ask them to stop. And if it's not, you have the right to go to your employer and say that people are talking about your personal life. Also, if you want to avoid issues, stop talking about sexuality, politics, and religion in the workplace. That's a surefire way of getting people heated. So what are some contributors to stress and disrespect in the workplace? Fairness. When people aren't treated fairly, they're going to get upset. What are some of the other causes? Stress. Stress is a huge factor. And when we're stressed, we don't tend to think clearly. And so a lot of people say, well, I perform well under stress, which is true, but only for short periods of time. And if we're really stressed, we don't. And I'll give you an example. How many of you have had an argument with somebody and like half an hour later or an hour later, you came back with the best comeback or the best example, but the argument was already over? That's because you had time to cool down. When we're in an argument, we're in a very stressful situation, we don't think clearly. And so this is a really good rule, is if you've had an argument with somebody, a really heated argument, wait 24 hours before talking to them again. Both of you will have cooler heads and you will be able to have a much more meaningful conversation. So where does it start? Where does a respectful workplace start? It starts up at the top. If your boss isn't respectful, if they harass, if they're mean to individuals, it goes down. The nice thing is you're watching this video because chances are your boss, your managers, and your CEO want to have a respectful workplace. And so the benefits are it increases morale, increases productivity, it increases retention, and increases satisfaction. And the critical thing about satisfaction is if you're happy at work, you're going to go happy home. And if you're happy at home, you're going to go happy to work. It's a cyclical relationship. Some of the causes to workplace respect are change. People hate change, and that's why we talked about habits at the beginning. People hate changing their habits. And so with a new technology being introduced, higher demands, remember, we work well under stress, but only for short periods of time. Diversity, if we have lots of cultures, low resources, if we are not if we are meant to work with bad tools and not the resources that we need to do our job, it's going to be very frustrating. If we don't have the training to do our jobs, we're going to be very frustrated as well. And if there's internal politics and gossip and that sort of thing, it's going to increase our stress level. The problem is when we're very stressed all the time, it leads to unprofessional behavior. Lashing out, and we tend to lash out directly for the personal, which leads to the bullying, harassment, and discrimination. And if that's unchecked, it will lead to violence, and that never ends well. Our tone of voice. When we're frustrated, we become unprofessional, and it leads to, belittling, sighing, going, what are you? What are you, an idiot? And our tone of voice is very important. Our body language, showing favoritism to certain people, not following the dress code, gossiping about individuals, leaving a mess behind us, swearing all the time, bringing in stinky lunches, or even personal body odor. Your employer has the right for you to shower and use deodorant. Listening to loud music, misusing of email, having loud outbursts of frustration and anger, ignoring policies, playing pranks on people that's unwelcomed, leering. So you don't like somebody, so as they're walking by, you're staring at them as they're walking by. That is going to lead to a lot of frustration for that other individual. And differences in culture. And so what I'm going to say to this is Canada is a wonderful place. It actually, statistically speaking, is the least discriminatory country in the world. However, it's a two-way conversation. We, us Canadians, have to be sensitive to other cultures, and other cultures have to be sensitive to Canadian culture. It's a two-way, so both of us need to be patient. Both of us need to watch our humor, because what's funny in one language isn't funny in another. That doesn't mean you can't have fun and joke around at work. It just means you have to be a little bit more aware and be open-minded. When somebody's been insulted, have an open mind to see whether you truly intended or if there's something that you can change in your behavior so it doesn't happen again. The other thing I'm going to say is if somebody has violated your expectations, your cultural norms, or that sort of thing, you can't get mad if you haven't expressed. How are they supposed to know that they have violated your expectations? So share your expectations, especially if they haven't been met. And then ask yourself, is it reasonable for me to have those expectations of other people? Have a conversation with people. So if all of those things, if all those things are happening at work and they're not being checked, people aren't talking about, they're not having open communications, they're not being patient, they're not sharing with individuals, it's going to lead to frustration. And when we're frustrated, again, we go straight to the personal, and it's going to lead to discrimination, harassment, and bullying. And those definitions, those things have different definitions, but all in all, they're very bad. And they can be as broad as just unwelcoming comments, physical contact, patting somebody on the back really hard, or talking, and we go straight for the personal. We'll talk about a person's race, religion, ancestry, income, a whole bunch of things. And so, again, as soon as you go towards somebody's race, somebody's sexual orientation, that sort of thing, you're violating human rights and you're violating the law. Here's the interesting part. You only have to harass somebody once in order to break the law. You don't have to do it multiple times. By definition, if you do it multiple times, it's considered bullying. However, you just have to pat somebody on the butt once for it to be breaking the law, right? You don't have to pat somebody 10 times. So here's a question for you. You thought it would be funny to throw a water balloon at a coworker. Is that discrimination, harassment, unprofessional conduct, or it's actually violence? When you throw something at an employee, you're committing an act of violence. When we tend to think about workplace violence, we actually tend to think about somebody physically getting hit, but it's a much broader definition. Argumentative behavior is workplace violence. Implied, you better not come into work tomorrow or you'll be sorry, workplace violence. If you do this again, I'm gonna hurt you, workplace violence. If you damage somebody's works area, workplace violence. If you have bizarre behavior, what are you going to do about it, huh? What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? That's considered workplace violence. If you poke somebody on the chest, it's considered workplace violence. And let's say you throw an apple at a wall because you're frustrated, it's considered workplace violence. So what should you do when you see unprofessional conduct, discrimination, harassment, bullying, or violence in the workplace? Well, first of all, you should ask yourself, did the person truly intend or did they just not know? Ask yourself if you've contributed to the behavior, what your body language was like. And if you're not sure and you don't want to talk to the person, you don't want to talk to your manager, or you don't want to talk to the victim, what you should do is you should use your EAP program. And you can speak with a counselor about your situation, and they can give you much better advice than you can come up with your own. And ultimately, you do have to report it. Doing nothing is no longer an option. And so What happens when you do all the right things and your organization is not willing to do anything about workplace violence and harassment? Well, the only way to protect yourself is to document what happened, what was said, uh, when did it happen, where did it happen, were there any witnesses around, and then who did you ultimately report to? You have a much stronger case bringing it up to your manager when you have multiple instances with dates and times and witnesses around you than just coming up to your manager and saying, I've been harassed or somebody has hurt my feelings. Ultimately, it is very important for you to address these issues because disrespectful workplace will lead to both physical and emotional health issues. It will lead to depression, self-esteem issues, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, suicide, and withdrawing from your environment. And ultimately, when you don't have your health, you have nothing. Steve Jobs was one of the most richest people in the world, and his health um, degraded, and there was no amount of money in the world that could help him. When you lose your health, you lose the battle. You have to watch out for yourself, and your health is your first priority. So if your organization is not willing to do anything, leave and report them to human rights and report them to occupational health and safety because it needs to stop. You were brave enough to leave, and the other people that are suffering in that work environment need your help. This leads to you don't have to leave if your organization is willing to work with you, right? And so you have to watch out for each other. So here are some signs that you might be that might come up if somebody is being bullied. So decreasing creativity, they stopped sharing ideas. They're calling in sick late all the time. They're taking longer breaks than they should. They're coming in late all the time because they don't want to come in. And their performance takes a huge nosedive. And there's 3 factors that contribute to work performance issues taking a nosedive very quickly: drugs and alcohol, personal issues at home, and workplace harassment and bullying or violence. So what happens if you witness workplace harassment or bullying and it's not affecting you? Well, guess what? You have the right to work in a place where it's free of discrimination and violence. It is your right to work in a place where it's free of discrimination and violence. And so standing by just because it's not happening to you is not an option either. And so if you see it, be supportive to the person, come up to them, let them know you're an ally. Let them know, inform them what their rights are, and try to neutralize if that person is not willing to talk to the offending party. Talk to them, say, hey guys, this person doesn't appreciate the behavior that you're demonstrating. And ultimately, if it doesn't stop, it is your right to tell somebody because you deserve to work in a place free of discrimination, harassment, and workplace violence. So, what isn't workplace violence? Because I get this all the time. And it's usually with low performing employees that the manager has now decided to focus on their performance. And the first thing they say is, I'm being discriminated, I'm being harassed. So, if a manager is trying to address your work performance and keep you to a specific standard that all employees are expected to perform to, it is not harassment. If your performance has taken a nosedive recently and they're trying to help to increase your performance, it's not workplace harassment. And if you're not following policies and your manager insisting that you follow policies, it's not harassment. They still have to do it respectfully, but it's not harassment. So let's use a couple real life examples. There's a person with a large nose. Everyone starts calling them Pinocchio. What do? Well, first you ask the person, do they mind being called Pinocchio? If they say no, I actually think it's funny, you've done your job. If they say no, I don't like it, inform them of their right not to be called Pinocchio in the workplace. If they're not willing to do anything about it, talk to the people that are calling them Pinocchio, and if they don't stop, report it. What happens if you're walking by and you hear a group of employees talking about a specific religion and how they don't want that religion to be in their workplace? Well, they're actually breaking the law. So just inform them, hey guys, I overheard you talking. It's none of my business, but you're breaking the law. And if the wrong person or management hears you talking about this, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. So if you guys want to talk about it, you're more than welcome to talk about it at home, but let's leave it away from the workplace. And lastly, what happens if somebody comes in and insults your intelligence and says you're such an idiot and walks away? Well, following them is not going to be going to resolve anything right now. So wait for the 24-hour rule and have a conversation with them after the fact. You're going to have a much more meaningful conversation 24 hours after than right there when you're both in the heat of the moment and you've just been insulted. So your employer has responsibility. And guess what? The law says as soon as you have one person reporting to you, one person, you are the employer. So you don't have to be a CEO. You don't have to be a manager. You just have to be directing one person in your organization to do work, and you are an employer by definition of the law. So you have to instruct your workers on how to recognize workplace violence. This video is doing that. You have to communicate policies to your employees. You have to have the appropriate responses of what to do. And ultimately, you have to document what you did with that complaint and have processes in place to address workplace violence. Managers, you have to educate your employees on how to recognize and what to do, and educate your supervisors on how to address workplace violence. You have to address it. You can't just ignore it. Ignoring is no longer an option. You have to follow up. So you've told somebody, stop it, a complaint's been done. Doing it once is not enough. You have to follow up to see whether that behavior has stopped. And ultimately, you have to be a support for the target. So often we address the offending party. We don't provide support for the person being addressed. The best thing to do when somebody comes with a complaint for you, instead of coming up to that person, whether it's the offending person or the person being bullied or harassed, instead of saying so-and-so told me or I've been told, because that's going to open a whole bunch of questions, the best thing you can say is, look, I've noticed that your performance is suffering. What's going on? Or, hey, I've noticed that you tend to be a little hard on Billy. You need to stop that. That's going to start a much better conversation than somebody told on you. So managers and supervisors' responsibility, doing an option or doing nothing is not an option. You have to commit to a respectful workplace, which means you need to talk the walk and walk the talk. And so that means monitoring your own behavior. If you're being disrespectful, having temper tantrums, calling people stupid, swearing around, that's how your employees are going to react, because they're going to be modeling your behavior. Communicate effectively. Ensure confidentiality when you can with that, hey, I've noticed, but ultimately when you're doing an investigation, confidentiality is going to be broken, because when you're going to go up to a person, you're not going to go, so, hey, have you recently touched a butt? You're going to say that, right? You're going to say, hey, so-and-so came forward with a complaint about you touching their butt. Is that correct? Investigate the incidents. Avoid, just because somebody's a bad performer doesn't mean that they're lying. And so you gotta take away your biases and treat it each case by case, and avoid trying to make a decision before you have all the facts. Implement a discipline, whether it's a written warning, a verbal warning, a suspension, or termination, depending how severe it is. And ultimately, document it. Document it. So that might be a quick journal entry, an email to yourself, a note, or emailing HR or your manager that you've spoke to them, or emailing the offending person. Hey, as per our conversation, I asked you to stop picking on so-and-so. But you have to document to prove that you've actually addressed it. Just saying that you did it is not enough. We're done. So I told you it wasn't going to be that bad, right? You are ultimately in control of your own behavior. How a person comes up to you, you have no control over. However, how you react is completely in your control. Take the higher road, okay? Add to workplace respect. Don't be the problem, be the solution, okay? Stand up for yourself and stand up for others. Document, tell somebody, and make sure it's everyone's responsibility to have a respectful workplace. Thank you.